Welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopilak. My guest today is Mark Waller. He is the owner and director of Gallery Moderne, which is a gallery in Piermont. But he's here today to talk about an exhibition that will be opening at Rockefeller State Park, featuring the work of John Hansegger. So I think I mispronounced that word, his name, didn't I, Mark?
No, it's Hansegger.
Hansegger. Well, let me welcome you.
Thank you.
And let me, before we talk about John Hansegger, ask you a little bit about your background.
I'm third generation antiques and art dealer. I had a gallery in London for 25 years. Then I moved to the States in 1999, and I kind of reversed what I did. I used to collect paintings and deal 20th century decorative, applied art. And then I opened the gallery in Piermont and kind of reversed it. So I'm now dealing paintings, and I collect and deal a little bit with fine 20th century.
So you have a big background with Lalique. Yes,
I do. I sort of worked Lalique from 1972, 73, all the way through its ascendancy to fame. I had the only gallery that dealt just Lalique in the world, and it was in Halkin Arcade in Belgravia.
Okay, so it was a big change for you to come here.
I opened the gallery in Piermont thinking I was going to deal Hudson River paintings, which I adore, but when you live in the Hudson Valley, you got the real thing there.
That's right.
It wasn't such a home run as I'd hoped. But it's a beautiful little town, and I'm 50 foot from the Hudson, so it's a very pleasant place to work.
Oh, it is. It's wonderful, Piermont.
Gorgeous.
And so how did John Hansegger get into your life?
I was involved in the dispersal of his estate. Me and three other groups were kind of involved with it. And it was just fascination. I mean, his paintings are light, fun, joyful. They're very colourful, and I saw this stuff. What is that doing here?
You had never seen him before?
Well, I'd never seen his work before. I mean, I'd worked in Paris at the weekends with the Lalique trade, and
right.
My eye for French, paintings and the art of that period was, pretty refined. But to find this stuff in Hillsdale, New York, or from Hillsdale, New York, was a bit of a shock. So I was fascinated. I got involved. We put a major investment into this stuff, and then we started digging up the history of it, which turned out to be as good as the art is.
Because he has a fabulous. First of all, he was born in Switzerland.
Yeah, he's Swiss, from a small, born in Saint-Gallen in the canton of Zug, small canton. And at the age of 20, he had his first one-man show of portraits, right? And portraiture's really key to his techniques.
Right. But I understand he had a hard background. He was raised in an orphanage.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. Yes, we know he knew his grandmother. He etched. He did an etching of her, and she's very, very old at that time. But he was brought up in an orphanage and had a bit of a tough childhood.
So 1928. He was 28. Is that what happened?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, so he was born in 1900.
1908.
Oh, so he was born in 1908, so he was 20 in 1928. Yeah. And he started out very realistic portraits.
Yeah, I mean, in order to be noticed as an artist in Switzerland, in provincial Switzerland at that time, you actually had to rival a man called Unger, right?
Okay.
He was the great Swiss genre academic painter who did these beautiful, almost photographic, charming portraits of the local cowherd, the local girls, right. After Courbet, that sort of style. But Hansegger, the aggressive young man, which he really was, full of energy, produced a range of portraits, and they're marvellous. They're beautiful, and throughout his life, he always had the ability to throw portraits together. And when he when he does it in that very realistic style, they're breathtaking.
Because it's so interesting, because we're going to see today that he doesn't end up with realistic work. He changes as he goes along.
Understanding Hansegger, learning about Hansegger is a modern art history course with one artist. It's great fun.
Yeah,
I mean it's really interesting.
He really was in the thick of things. He was with Picasso and Klee and all of the great artists.
Yeah, I mean you can actually find out with all the wonderful academic research. We actually found out which painting rocked his boat. I mean, it's the girl on the red sofa. He saw it in Switzerland in 1931, and it obviously just changed his
Picasso. He took Picasso's.
He saw a Picasso.
Okay.
A famous Picasso. The girl on the red sofa.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Couch, whatever.
I'm sorry.
No.
I don't know that piece. Was it Cubism at the time?
It was modern.
Okay.
It was modern. It was a classic Picasso. It wasn't the true Cubist Picasso, but it was a very modern painting.
Okay.
And this obviously stopped him in his tracks. Although he'd just been accepted to the a school ran by Ferdinand Hodler, who is one of the great Swiss artists, great landscape artist. He sort of dropped everything and went to Paris.
Brave.
Yeah, he was very brave. He was a very brave man, physically very energetic, you know. He ended up living in 64 Rue Montparnasse, which is right in the thick of it, round the corner from Mondrian. Alex Calder was there at that time. You know,
so
everybody.
exciting.
Yeah,
just, oh my gosh,
you know,
amazing.
hanging out on the dome, the whole thing. And we think that he must have studied print or worked with Atelier 17 in Paris, where Miro, Nevelson, Picasso were all working etchings and printing processes. It's a very important studio. It moved to New York, and all the abstract expressionists worked there. In New York. So he painted Picasso.
We have a portrait that he did of Picasso.
Yeah, it's a unusual image of Picasso. There's a few photographs of him at that time, not many, but the famous one of this style is by Man Ray. It's not everybody's sort of idea of what Picasso looks like. He's got this rather curious comb over, which I think in England we call a bobby after the our English football captain, Bobby Charlton.
Okay.
I guess over here you might call it a Donald. But you know, it's Picasso. It was a very wealthy, very famous artist at the time in Paris. I mean, the velvet jacketed smoothie. You know, he was the business, and you know, art dealers queuing outside his door with bags of cash. You know, but he worked through Paris until. Even after the occupation, he's had an advantage. He's Swiss, he's French and German speaking. All right, so he did what he could in Paris, and then I think he helped a good few people getting out and getting about. You know, with the Swiss connection. He eventually gave up, went back to Switzerland, and he calls it in isolation in Switzerland from 1942 to 1946. But he opened a gallery called the Gallery des Eaux Vives in Zurich, and he ran the only art gallery in Europe that was open selling abstract art.
Okay.
It was in an old butcher's shop. It's unbelievably modern when you see the one image that we've kind of tracked of it. I mean, it's just remarkable.
For that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's modern by today's standards.
But he was also showing his work?
He showed his work. He worked with Max Bill on some publications, some books. Max Bill became famous later on for his book design. And many other things, but that was that. And yeah, he showed
let's look at some of his early work, though, because this free forms from 1940, that would have been something.
It's in the 40s. It's 1942, 43. Okay. It's a really early piece of art concrete. It's got its early signature on it, and it's fun. It's these concretions, they're called, these firm-edged floating docks. It relates to Theo van Doesburg and the art concrete movement, which still exists. But that's a small, early little painting, and it's just got this whimsical, floating light feeling.
Did he put titles on it, or there was just free form?
No, most of these are titles. Most of them are titles. Not all of them. No.
Okay.
Not all of them.
Right. So, would you feel like he was experimenting with this, or
he played?
Okay.
He played. I mean, a lot of his titles for his paintings are playful, joyful, rhythm. They're light and joyous landscape, joyful landscape. He used his English was functional.
Okay.
I think the word is functional for his English.
So, do you think he was giving English titles to them? No.
They changed, as he learned English, they changed to English. But his spelling was always hysterical.
Okay.
I mean, it's great fun.
Because he hasn't come to America yet. I know he comes to America eventually, but we're still in the 40s.
Oh yeah,
now.
he's still there.
He's still in Switzerland.
This is Form Faber.
Right. And the next painting that he did, I love this one. This is a dancer, a surreal. We called it surreal dancer.
Yeah, it's. I think it's surreal girl dancing.
Okay.
But yeah, this is important. This is his first visit that we can authenticate to New York, and he showed at the gallery Nierendorf.
Oh, okay.
Which was a really famous modern gallery, very well respected. It still exists in Germany today, but they had a big presence in New York.
So now has he moved to New York at this point?
He comes through New York, and there's some interest here. I mean, as you can see, the influence is he'd given Klee a one-man show, and there's a certain influence of Klee here.
Yes.
But then there's a little bit of the French surrealists in there, and then this background, which is really his earliest and strongest contribution to art history, is this background, which is called he calls abstract parallelism.
Okay.
And if you look at this stuff and his other works, and there's two of these works in the show, you see in 1937 he was doing pure abstract expressionism.
Oh.
That is way ahead of the pack.
Okay.
He's way ahead of that. My gut feeling is that he designed and developed this as a background for his portraiture.
Oh, I see.
And the other thing that is so it feels so right is that if you read the description of Alex Calder's circus, he had these hanging lights at the back as a background, and the feeling of these flecks of colour, the feeling is there. And there's another thing about this Nurendorf exhibition. He says he was exhibiting with Klee, and he had just done a show of Klee. And if you read the history books about the Guggenheim, you find that 170 Klee paintings were actually at the Gallery Nurendorf, which through very complicated and perhaps a little controversial means ended up with the Guggenheim. That's the main body of the first body of their work from their work of Klee.
Interesting. So the 1955 forms that we have, the 50. Is the 50? Is that would that be abstract parallelism?
No.
Oh,
this is pure. I mean, this is him typically absorbing modern design idioms. I'm very fond of this thing, because if you imagine it as a circle of paper, you could. It's because I deal with ceramics. It would make the most wonderful vase. I mean, it's a column. It's a repeating pattern, which are very difficult things to make. So you could make a column out of it. The form's marvelous. It's so 50s. I mean, it's so 50s. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the next sort of influence of his is Miro. These floating, joyful, coloured.
Oh yes, I do see that Miro in there. Yes, now that you mention it. Yes.
I mean, he's got that, and that's why yet another reason why I think about Atelier 17, his connection there. But he's got some of Miro's joyful influences there.
So was he in America in the 50s then?
He went through. He was in. New York in 47, we know that, and then he did an awful lot of travelling, but we know he went down to Ecuador, and he bought a farm there.
Oh, wow.
With Rose, his wife. He, maybe he was so upset with what transpired in New York.
Oh,
he
maybe.
just went down to Ecuador, and he was there for 4 years painting profusely. He did all sorts of the indigenous peoples, portraits, stuff like that. But I think that was too quiet for him.
Okay.
This energetic man. He travelled to South Africa. I think either before or after he went to Ecuador. He was in Japan. He was in Palestine. I mean, He was all over the place. I mean, he really, really travelled.
Do you feel that the travel had an influence on his work?
Oh yeah. I mean, he came back from Ecuador with these what they call stick figures, or these very straight, parallel, adapting from it, but he put figurative motifs into them.
Okay.
His travel it was very much a part of Hansegger.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we haven't got him in New York yet. So when does
he arrives in New York about 1953.
And he stays here?
He stays there.
Okay, he opens a school, doesn't he?
No. He lives in Midtown Manhattan, opens a studio in Midtown Manhattan.
Okay.
He got to know all the all the right people uptown.
Okay.
Right, he was a big artist. He was around. He was going to be in 57th Street.
Oh, 50. Okay.
Right, so he was around that area. He taught a few. He taught a few people.
Okay. I guess that's where I got the idea of the
yeah,
school.
no, he taught the wife of the poet laureate, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Right.
Her sister was that famous photographer who did the kind of the film with Robert Downey Jr. I should know her name.
Yeah, that's okay.
But anyway, he then met his next wife, because Rose mysteriously disappeared somewhere in Ecuador.
Okay.
Which may be another reason why he left. Anyway, he comes to New York. He's on his own, and he meets a woman from his old canton in Zug, who's selling Swiss novelties somewhere in New York. Anyway, they end up getting married, and they have a farm. Her family has a farm in Hillsdale, New York.
Oh, okay.
And they live in New York for a while, and then they eventually retire up to Hillsdale, New York, in the farm. And they have a house in Florida, and that's where he did a lot of his painting.
Okay, so eventually he gets to do this portrait of Nelson Rockefeller.
Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, they're neighbours. I mean, he knew what was going on in the modern art world. He was very conversant with it, but he obviously didn't know the whole political connection, whole political, movement that was going on behind it. He knew that Nelson Rockefeller was a very important patron of the arts, and also that he painted. We think he painted David because they were near neighbours, near neighbours. But yeah, he paints, I think, a very powerful portrait of Nelson Rockefeller with all these movement of ornaments going on. That's a typical Hansegger painting. It's just that the subject is so unusual.
Right. Yeah. He abstracts the face and.
It's very clever.
And what would you say about Au Revoir? Where would that fit in?
That's the most restrained and refined and precise example of his figure, stick figure thing that he came back with and refined throughout his career as these stick figures. He did a show in New York, major show. It was critiqued by Marta Kasorwin, who was ex-MoMA. She's very serious. She did a very serious, deep reflection on his work and he was one of those big names in New York at the time. I mean, he had many exhibitions. I mean, he came back to New York in 1953 for a one-man show at Princeton. Okay. That's what brought him back. 53, and which is now the Princeton Art Museum in that building.
Okay.
So then we've got him sort of.
So was it hard to collect all of this work and find it in the portraits? And
no, I mean, he was funny guy. He'd been a galleryist. He owned a gallery. He knew the art business. He knew what was to come. He charged like a wounded rhino for his works of art. I mean, he charged proper money for it.
So he could support
and he loved
himself.
Cash.
Okay.
You know. So he did not. He supported himself very comfortably, but he didn't sell an awful lot of paintings.
Okay.
He knew the value of these things. He was totally convinced. He knew the value of these things. I mean, the Picasso was kept in a vault.
Hansegger had the
portrait. That's his
Okay.
collection privé.
Okay.
So yeah, he knew the value of these things.
Okay.
He knew the value.
So you have a lot of
them.
them. And then he developed something called ornamentalism.
Yeah, I mean, the abstract parallelism, stick figures, and then this I find it very light. It's great fun. It's ornamentalism, which is part of that fun English he kind of plays around with.
Right.
And they're ornaments placed so that your mind, your eye, creates the landscape. Your eye is making what you see.
But when you say ornaments, what do you mean?
An ornament is a floating abstract shape.
Oh, okay.
That's an ornament.
Okay.
I mean, that in art parlance, they're ornaments.
So it's almost like a collage of, but I'm saying the wrong.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's a mentally done as a collage. You're absolutely right. It's like
but it's all paint.
It's all paint. It's not a collage, but it's like Jan art with those simple, free-form shapes.
Right.
But it's just more complicated than that.
So he puts it all together, and when your eye puts it together, you see
think,
a landscape.
Oh, it's a landscape.
And then you go close and you see all these shapes.
Yeah, and it's not. But your eye immediately thinks it's a landscape.
Yeah.
And they're joyous. They're fun. They're very colourful. It's very. I mean, they're 62 to 67. They're kind of psychedelic. They're kind of Sergeant
little
Pepper.
Hippie.
Yeah, a little bit hippie. A little bit. The kids love them.
The colors are very different from what's happening before in his work. Now he's getting very bright and colorful.
Yeah, he's always been strong with his colours. I mean, one thing Hansegger loves is red. I mean, the man loved red paint. He knew how to use it. He loves it. But yeah, they're very bright. The ornamentalism series is very bright and joyous.
Right.
Great fun.
We have this one that was called Abstract. I think this is a fabulous
painting. It was. I mean, he wanted $9,000 for that painting
in 1960s.
In the 60s. I mean, it's very precise. It's very. There's a lot of work in it. It's very complicated. But yeah, I mean, it's a good size.
Is that a big piece?
It's a good size painting. Yeah, I mean, it's got a commanding presence, and it's a mixture of many of his sort of signature styles.
And this will be in the show at Rockefeller.
It's in the show. Yeah. It's a great painting.
And then it looks like he changes again, and he goes into these kind of free shapes.
Yeah, I mean, if you know the history of abstract art, I mean, which you know that the tighter edged ones are earlier, and then later on they loosened up with a la Rothko. He frees this stuff up, and he did paint these big free shapes, as he calls them, rough-edged things, and then it's about the texture, the colours, the application, the strokes. It's the whole abstract expressionist thing, and he really did it for real. I mean,
you mentioned Rothko, which were
colour field.
Yeah, colour field, but very structured. These feel different.
Yeah,
they don't
but
feel
big blocks of colour.
Big blocks of colour.
It's just the emotion. It's just how you connect with the emotion.
Okay.
And,
yeah, and I understand he loved roosters.
Yeah, I mean, that you could begin and end with roosters. I mean, the man loved roosters. It was the first thing he drew as a kid.
Okay.
He learned how to teach a rooster to, pick up things, do things. And throughout his life, he painted roosters, and he became known as the rooster painter. People loved these roosters, and he got rooster shows, which I'm not, it was him.
Well, it must have been more than just he must have meant something to him.
Oh, it meant a lot to him. It tied in with that, and he wrote about it. The energy, the power. He knew the whole history of roosters. He tells a story about where cocktails come from. Chinese influence and its symbolism in China. He really understood it, and he painted it in every which way, from these cubist roosters, exploding roosters, Jackson Pollock style roosters. They're all Hansegger roosters, but very energetic, and they're fun. And strangely enough, one of the groups were Korean people, and they bought 350 of them from the estate, and I go, what in the world? And then of course I find out that Korean ceramics, the main logo is roosters.
Oh, no kidding.
No, so.
And do we know why?
Ancient history. Ancient history. It's the rooster is the symbol of France.
Okay.
It's the king of the farmyard.
Okay.
Agricultural thing. It's wheat is another wonderful, farmyard thing. That's another symbol of wealth.
Okay.
It comes from the Roman times.
The roosters, idea of the...
Yes.
Okay.
It is that ancient,
this is something brand new. I'm going to have to study the history of roosters.
I think I remember them distinctly on the front of, legionnaires.
On their shields their flags?
Yeah. Proud.
Very
roosters proud.
And in charge.
Very much, and aggressive. They will
fight for
your territory.
Right. So I guess so. Interesting. So we have an early piece, this memory suspension. It's sort of out of sync here with chronology.
It's kind of about the show. It's reviewing the show. It's memories of his past. That's I put it on the cover of a little sort of.
Yeah, you have a couple of books that he's
that's the early one. This is just all the historical references, but it's just memories. It's a surrealist painting from the Sur Independence in Paris in 1936. It kind of shows that he got really stuck into the French art scene at that time. There are many reviews of his work, and a lot of illustrations, and that painting is illustrated at that time.
Okay. So he's working abstractly and realistically, and experimenting and doing all kinds of things.
He is, and is it only Picasso that can do this sort of thing? He had his belief in his work that he was quite capable, and he obviously was of bouncing around with styles. When you really get the hang of it, you realise that there are 3 or 4 main directions and about 10 or 11, options, and he mixed and matched. Once you've seen the body of work that I have, and you can now research and see, you get the hang of it, and it's clear as
day.
Yeah.
And we have a self-portrait that he did, so we'll get an idea of what he looked like before we
this is in the 60s, I believe. It gives you the sense of his presence, his dogmatic, sort of energetic presence. The earliest photograph we've got, it looks like a Hugh Grant sort of mugshot. It's like hair everywhere, optimistic sort of young man. Yeah. And he did paint himself throughout his thing, so you see the aging process.
If you didn't have a model, you paint yourself when you're a portrait artist. I think that's what happens.
I think most of them are an emotional, period of reflection.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
A period of reflection.
So all of the things we've seen today will be in the show?
Most of them. The Picasso, we just don't dare. We just don't dare. And the Nelson Rockefeller, we know it, but we don't know exactly where it is at the moment.
Okay. And this was curated by you and Audrey Leeds. Yes.
Audrey came, she's local, she came in the gallery. We talked many things, and I introduced her to my pet project, and she's a very knowledgeable lady.
Yes,
she's a very knowledgeable lady.
Well,
she has seen it a lot.
Yes.
And she understood this very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited about seeing the show, and it runs, I think, until November 4th.
No, I think it's October the 28th.
October 28th?
Yeah,
okay,
so.
It opens this weekend on the 22nd.
Yep.
I can't wait to come to see it.
It's fun.
And thank you so much for coming and explaining this whole thing to us. I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching.